Welcome to History Obscured. Well, this is the first episode that I'm doing as a part of the series where we're going to be touching on various topics within history that's not talked about as much. Hence why I called the name of the channel History Obscured. Now, the first topic that I am going to touch on for the series is the Willie Lynch letter, Making of a Slave. Alright, now, I purchased this book some years back, but I never really took my time to actually read the book. I have read parts of the book, but I haven't sat down and really read the whole book and meditated on it. And even with the things I heard in the book, it really was mind-blowing to know that this process of controlling the slave was even thought of. But when I sat down and I read the book to get a better understanding of Willie Lynch's plan on how to control the slave, I was shocked. I was even more mind blown with the information that I gathered when reading the whole book. So, for you guys that are history nerds or even just are curious to find out about your history concerning slavery, I would definitely recommend you read the book of The Making of a Slave, Willie Lynch. Now, one thing I do want to point out is a lot of people, or it has been said, that the Willie Lynch letter is not real and Willie Lynch wasn't a real person. Now, one thing I can say to that is, okay, it may be true, it may not. But what we can say is that the plan or the method to keep the slave under the subjection of the slave master has definitely played a part in the demise of the black population today. All right, not just in America, not just in the UK or the Western world, but in all the world, the whole world, wherever you find black people. All right, so as we go through this book, I am going to touch on a few things. Now, it's important that we understand this history because, especially being black in Western society, there's a disservice that's given onto the black population from the school system, because we don't really learn about things like this concerning the truth behind slavery, or just events that happen in slavery that really play on the mental of the population of black people, or the so-called Negro. All right. So as I was reading this book, I highlighted points in the book that I wanted to go over in this video, just to give you guys an understanding of why Willie Lynch decided to put this plan in place. Now, mind you, before we even get into the method as to what he planned to do to keep the slaves in control, he already applied this method himself in the West Indies. Okay? And he was successful in doing so. All right? Now, what we have to understand is he wasn't new to this. This was not something that he was new to. This was something that he done, and he saw the success behind what he did. All right. So we're going to start off with page 9. All right. And it says, while Rome used cores of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasions. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. What else is it? Yep, your animals are killed, gentlemen. You know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. Yep, so it says, I am not here to enumerate your problem. I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. Alright? So Willie Lynch clearly saw that there was a problem with slave masters controlling their slaves. And he's going to these slave masters who are his people, and he's telling them, listen, I'm outlining the problems concerning the way your slaves are conducting themselves. They're out of control. Here is a solution to keep them in subjection to your authority. All right. So he says, in my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. All right. So it said at least. This method that I'm about to show you, right, if applied correctly, when it says at least, it means for a minimum amount of time that, let's just say it's not perpetual. At least it will continue for up to 300 years. And that's just the minimum, meaning that it could go for longer, but the minimum is 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. So this was something that he was pushing forth for towards the future generations as well. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. Now, this is key. The reason why it's key is because Willie Lynch, he was basically telling the slave masters that the only way that this method can work, as a summary, is making sure we divide them. How are we going to do this? Fear. The three elements was fear, distrust, and envy. So we want to start with fear. The fear is making reference to them having being fearful towards their slave master, because what we read prior was what? The slaves were causing insurrections, they were rebelling, they were figuring out ways on how to liberate themselves to fight against the oppression. All right, now, one of the ways to control that is by putting fear in them, so they do not continue those habits of trying to uprise against their oppressor. Distrust is going into what? Distrust amongst distrust amongst the slaves. Meaning if the slaves can't trust each other, they will be divided, they will be disunited. So we can control them like that. And envy, meaning what? Jealousy, hatred towards one another. All right? Having that desire to be better, or trying to uphold yourself better than your fellow brethren for whatever reason. You understand? And most of the reasons are not even valid. All right, it's just a sense of insecurity. But the point is, Willie Lynch pointed out these three elements that, if executed correctly, you will control your slave. Now, this is showing you the deepness of his method and the diligence that he put forth to make sure that this was executed right, and the effect that it has on the slave, and not only the slave, but in future generations as well. All right. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. So Willie Lynch was confident because he saw the effect of how it kept the slaves in check. Because he already done it himself and he saw the positive results. All right. And he's assuring his brethren that if you follow this, it will work for you also. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, sizes of plantations, status on plantations, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now, these are the various ways on how Willie Lynch wanted to get into the mental of the slaves by dividing them. You understand? And he goes into detail. All right, he touches on color, he touches on age, he touches on sex. He touches on these various aspects of the slaves to keep them divided. All right, I'm gonna read on. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. Meaning what? We have to destroy the moral values of slaves in order to control them. All right? And it all really goes down to slaves putting their full trust in their slave masters, which is the white man today, and not having trust, or better yet, love for their fellow brethren. And the reason why it's so hard hitting is because of the effects of the Willie Lynch letter today. All right, the divide amongst black people not uniting in every aspect you can think of, from family, from creating businesses, even simple gatherings. All right, there's a negative connotation that anywhere where there's a lot of black people, a fight is gonna break out. All right, and that stereotype can be validated because it's common. All right, no matter where you go in society, there's always, anywhere where you meet black people, there's always some form of negativity. Now, I'm not saying that's the case for all cases, but for the most parts, that's what we're known for. All right, and it all comes down to Willie Lynch's plan to keep the slaves in control. All right, now we're gonna read on. It says the black slaves are receiving this indoctrination, right? So a teaching is an indoctrination. All right, the black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. See that? So this is generational. All right, this is generational. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. So again, it goes into the deepness of how are we going to divide these slaves? All right, we're going to divide them based on their skin color. All right, so the darker slaves and the lighter slaves will not look at each other as the same race. They will look at each other as the same race, but more so they will still find a divide, meaning I'm lighter, you're dark, so there is a distinction between the two, which really that is not the case. All right, it's just the confusion that Willie Lynch implemented and taught the rest of the slave masters to keep the slaves in control. All right, you must use the female versus the male and male versus female. Now we're going to touch more on that in the next episode, but as you can see, he was, and one of the ways he did that was to destroy the male image, which we're going to get into next week. All right, now when you look today, especially with marriages, black men and black women can't seem to hold a steady marriage. There's always divorce. There's always some form of disagreement, or I think what do they call it? I think they call it is it irreconcilable? Can't pronounce it. Irreconcilable differences, something like that. All right. The divorce rate is skyrocketing in the black community. You have a high percentage of single parent homes. All right. The black man's nowhere to be found. All right. You got these women raising up their sons to be effeminate, to be emotional. Okay. This all goes into Willie Lynch's plan to destroy the morality amongst the slaves. Because guess what? Even in slavery, black slaves still had some form of morals. All right. But this was the beginning of destroying that. All right. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks, but it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. So again, this is showing you the mindset as to having division amongst the slaves, but making sure that the slaves only trust in their slave master. That again is what, and that's the term you hear about, what's it called, house Negro and field Negro. House Negroes are the ones that are still under the subjection of their slave master, but they're given more benefits, or maybe sit in the house, maybe have access to better food, while the field Negro just stays in the field and he carries out the normal duties that a slave would if he was out, in the lowest condition. So already they created a divide with that. All right, and house Negroes were more loyal to their slave masters, while the field Negroes were, the ones that would rise, create insurrections to fight for their freedom. But the house Negroes didn't see that. They looked at it like they were already free because of the position that they were in. And there was a divide between house and field Negroes, because anytime field Negroes will create a rebellion and a house Negro got a whiff of it, what was the house Negro doing? Running to his slave master, revealing it. Hey master, those slaves in the field, they're creating an insurrection, they're creating a rebellion, you gotta stop them, master. Sorry for my accent, but you get the gist. So already there was that division there. We went from being a people that understood that we were being oppressed and we were all united in trying to fight for our liberty. Now there's division. All right? So this was one of the methods to keep control of the slave. All right? Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensively for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. What? Perpetually distrustful towards each other forever. Meaning they will never get to the point where they can trust one another. All right? And this is the sadness, behind the truth as to why black people cannot get along today. All right? So ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you were able to grasp something from that, because I'm showing you that this letter that was created by Willie Lynch was, although he went to the South to push it, you can tell that every slave master, no matter where they were, used this blueprint to control their slave. And it still affects us today. All right? Now, my fellow black people, we have to understand the truth of our history, not to just believe everything that we're taught. We have to use our time to educate ourselves, to understand the root of the problem, and to figure out ways on how to solve it. All right? But the only way you can do that is if you read your history and you learn more about yourself. We're too caught up in this Western society, learning about things that have nothing to do with our history or our purpose in life. We're too caught up in things that do not benefit us, when really we should be looking at our history, reading books, educating ourselves, and figuring out ways on how we can better our community. Because let's be real, we're suffering in every aspect of life that you can think of. Mentally, physically, socially, even spiritually. All right? But again, everything that has a beginning has an end. All right? And one of the ways to end this is to come back to the understanding of our history, learning our history, and fixing the problems within our community. And the first thing that's going to help us to do that is learning how to love one another. And that's deep within itself. Because remember, when we at the start of the book, we read that the three elements were fear, distrust, and envy. But the main two, which causes division amongst black people, was distrust and envy. And it all goes back to slavery. All right? So, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the history that I went over concerning the Willie Lynch letter. We're going to go over more next week. All right? So, yeah. Take care and peace.